Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am Mitch Nevada, Program Specialist with the Division of Community Assistance in the Office of Community Services. Today's webinar is the Fiscal Year 27 CSBG State Plan webinar, Diving Deeper, Sections 1 through 7. Please let us know your name, where you are joining from, and what you hope to learn today in the chat. During today's webinar, you will hear from members of the DCA Program Operations Branch as we provide an overview of the requirements for a complete fiscal year 27 CSBG state plan, including timelines and the CSBG eligible entity list, the SF424M, as well as a deeper dive into sections 1 through 7. We will end the webinar with closing remarks and time for questions. Again, we ask that all questions are entered into the Q&A pod. The third webinar of the FY27 CSBG State Plan series, diving deeper into sections 8 through 15, will take place on Thursday, April 9th, 2026, from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern. Please register for that webinar using the link provided in the chat. The CSBG lifecycle begins at the local level with the community needs assessment and development of community action plans. This is an essential consideration for informing the state plan, which we will discuss. However, the state plan acceptance is a key initial step in the funding process, so you will hear us encourage you to submit your plan early if possible, but definitely by September 1st as required. The PEAK framework, detailed on this slide, reminds us of the tools which can be used to successfully administer CSBG. Within the PEAK framework, the state plan is listed under accountability and knowledge. However, aspects of the state plan are included across all areas: performance, evaluation, accountability, availability, and knowledge. For performance, the CSBG grant recipient should utilize the planning process to think through, identify, and define expected outcomes and service goals that establish performance targets and align with the community needs assessment. The ACSI survey, organizational standards, and training and technical assistance should be considered as part of the state plan development process as well. A strong CSBG state plan ensures evaluation processes are informed by your training and technical assistance, how the eligible entities are performing as it relates to org standards, as well as monitoring outcomes. Submission of the state plan is part of accountability, requiring you to comply with the CSBG Act to receive the funding and to demonstrate that systems are in place at the state level to responsibly steward these resources. The state plan must be submitted to ensure the availability of CSBG services for individuals and families navigating poverty. And finally, the state plan addresses knowledge, ensuring CSBG administrators are aware of the needs and resources available, such as partnerships within their state, in order to make data-driven decisions on the most impactful uses of CSBG. State administrators should be well-versed in available guidance and learn from best practices to successfully administer CSBG. The CSBG State Plan is the official application and plan for CSBG funding as outlined in Section 676 of the CSBG Act. It documents how each state will administer funds to support progress toward the 3 national goals: eliminating the causes and conditions of poverty, empowering low-income individuals and families to achieve self-sufficiency, and revitalizing low-income communities. Completing the state plan should not be viewed as just meeting a legislative requirement, because it is also a tool for continuous improvement, helping states develop and implement processes that support effective and accountable use of CSBG funds. All federal fiscal year 27 state plans are due by September 1st, 2026, and must include the CSBG eligible entity list, the standard form for federal assistance, known as the SF424M, and sections 1 through 15, and an up-to-date designation letter. The state plan must meet all requirements of the CSBG Act, including the public hearing requirement. The CSBG state plan follows the federal fiscal year, which begins October 1st and ends on September 30th. States have the option to submit either a 1-year or a 2-year plan and should consider which option is most beneficial for your state. Some considerations may include policy and funding changes. If major changes are expected from the state level in CSBG funding allotments, eligible entity designations, or state policies, a 1-year plan may allow for timely updates. Other considerations could be performance management and feedback, or staffing and capacity, as states with limited staff or high turnover might prefer a 2-year plan to reduce the frequency of creating and submitting comprehensive plans. If a 2-year plan is selected, states should be prepared to submit revisions for major changes, such as amendments to the eligible entity list. Now drop a 1 or a 2 in the chat to identify to your colleagues if your state submits a 1 or a 2-year plan. You may consider reaching out to each other to learn more about how a state made its determination. A 1-year plan would cover fiscal year 27 from October 1st, 2026 through September 30th, 2027. A 2-year plan would cover fiscal years 27 and 28, extending from October 1st, 2026 through September 30th, 2028. After submitting by September 1st, 2026, DCA will work quickly to provide thorough feedback within 10 days of submission. The states in maroon on this slide are Group A and are required to submit a complete CSBG state plan for the fiscal year 27 CSBG state plan cycle. And the states in blue are Group B and are not required to submit a complete CSBG state plan for the fiscal year 27 CSBG state plan cycle. The listed states and territories under Group B may still revise their accepted CSBG state plan. However, OCS does not require states to revise their accepted 2-year state plans unless changes are necessary. More detail will be provided in the related CSBG State Plan Action Transmittal, which is currently being approved for release. We will now begin reviewing the CSBG eligible entity list, the SF424M, and sections 1 through 7. We encourage you to take notes as we present each section and open the State Plan PDF tool so you can complete sections as we go. The eligible entity list is the official listing of all CSBG eligible entities receiving not less than 90% of funds. It is important to always keep this list updated. The list uses the Unique Entity Identifier, or UEI, as an identifying number for each eligible entity. The UEI is included in the CSBG Smart Forms and allows OCS to assist with tracking changes. The eligible entity list is required for grant recipients. It is used to pre-populate several areas of the CSBG state plan, specifically items 5.1, 7.2, and 10.2. The eligible entity list must be updated and in submitted status prior to initializing a new plan. The eligible entity list is also used to populate the CSBG Annual Report Smart Forms, so OCS is requesting all revisions be completed as changes happen. As a reminder, after initializing the state plan, please review the listed items 5.1, 7.2, and 10.2 to ensure that the entity is populated correctly before proceeding any further in the plan. If issues are identified in the listed items after initialization, the plan may need to be restarted to correct the issue. Taking time to review and update the list before starting the plan can help ensure a smoother state plan submission process and more accurate reporting throughout the year. When you review item 5.1, be sure you have added or removed any entity from the list as necessary if the state has had designations or redesignations, dedesignations or voluntary relinquishments, and mergers. These changes must align with your response in the noted items in Section 5 of the plan. If your CSBG eligible entity list has changed in year 2 of an accepted CSBG state plan, please work with your CSBG program specialist and policy, data, and evaluation specialist to revise. The SF424M is submitted as the cover page of the CSBG state plan and is a requirement of the Office of Grants Management. It informs OGM of the authorized official, to whom OGM sends the notice of award. An important item to note is that the individual entered on the SF424M must match the authorized official as described in CSBG State Plan Item 1.2 and the designation letter, which is attached to CSBG State Plan Item 1.3. If the SF424M is not aligned with Item 1.2 and the attached letter, the program specialist will notify the grant recipient to address the discrepancies. Prior to submission of the SF424M, it is also critical to ensure the Unique Entity Identifier, or UEI, is correct. It is an automated field and should not be overlooked to ensure funding is able to be drawn down. If the authorized official changes, the CSBG grant recipient is required to revise their CSBG state plan, even if in the second year of a previously approved 2-year plan. That includes revising the SF424M, as well as the authorized official contact information under item 1.2, and updating the designation letter. Please alert your OCS program specialist if the authorized official changes to make sure the correct contact information is in place. Now let's dive into sections 1 through 7. Section 1 is the State Administration section, where basic information about the state agency, key staff, and the type of state plan being submitted, whether it is a 1-year or a 2-year plan. If your state has a state association, you must also include their contact information in this section. This section asks for contact details for the state office, the authorized official, and the state CSBG program contact. It also requires the state's designation letter. Please ensure that the designation letter is current. DCA uses this letter to verify that the state plan is certified by the correct authorized official. The state CSBG program contact cannot certify the plan unless they have been formally delegated to do so. This person should be approved by the state's chief executive officer. At a minimum, the letter should identify the designated CSBG lead agency and the title of the authorized official responsible for administering the grant. This section of the state plan collects basic but important administrative information. Items 1.1 and 1.1a indicate whether the state plan will cover 1 year or 2 years. As a reminder, CSBG state plans may be submitted as either a 1-year or 2-year plan, depending on the state's preference. Item 1.2d identifies the authorized official. This is the individual who has signatory authority for the grant and is named on the notice of award. Because of this, it's important that this information aligns with the SF424M and the designation letter included in the state plan. Item 1.4b identifies the point of contact. This is typically the person OCS communicates with most frequently regarding day-to-day CSBG administration and operational questions. Finally, Item 1.5 collects information on the state's Community Action Association, if applicable. This helps OCS understand the broader CSBG network structure within the state and identify additional partners that support the work of the eligible entities. Now we have a pop quiz. Please complete the poll that you see on your screen, and you may also answer in the chat. Which items in this section should align with the name listed in item 7F of the SF424M? Is it A, item 1.4, the CSBG point of contact, and item 1.3, the delegation letter? B, the item 1.5, the State Community Action Association, and item 1.3, the delegation letter? C, item 1.2, the authorized official, and item 1.3, the delegation letter? Or D, none of the above? And I'll give folks a moment to put in their answers. All right, I would say we can move forward. The correct answer is C, item 1.2, the authorized official, and item 1.3, the delegation letter. Section 2, State Legislation and Regulation, allows the state to identify if there is state legislation or regulations for the administration of CSBG. As evidence of a legislation or a regulation, states must provide documentation in item 2.3 via an attachment or a functional hyperlink. It is necessary that the CSBG lead agency complete this section accurately, as it allows OCS to make sure that grant recipients are administering funds in compliance with federal and state legislation and regulations. The flexibility of a block grant like CSBG requires the state to issue sound and clear guidance. In many instances, the state will hear from DCA, "What does your state regulation say?" It is important to note that if the state legislation or state regulation is silent, the CSBG Act will govern. For example, if the state rules do not prescribe the poverty line for eligibility, then the CSBG Act will govern. The block grant structure provides states the autonomy to establish rules as long as they do not conflict with the Act. Some states establish 100% as the FPL, which is allowed because it does not exceed what is established by the law or congressional action, so it is not in conflict. If there is a conflict, the state should take steps to address it, and in all cases, the CSBG Act will govern. Understanding both state rules and the federal statute is important for administrators as they work together to guide CSBG administration and ensure compliance. This section asks the state to identify state legislation or regulations that guide the administration of CSBG. States should provide documentation that demonstrates these authorities. This is typically done by attaching the legislation or regulation, or including a functional hyperlink to the statute or rule. It's important that the link is accessible and current, since OCS reviewers will use it to verify the information provided in the state plan. For some states, the authority may come directly from state statute, while others may rely more heavily on administrative regulations or rules. Either approach is acceptable as long as it clearly supports the administration of the program. The purpose of Section 3, State Plan Development and Statewide Goals, is to collect information on the state CSBG lead agency's vision to utilize CSBG funds in accordance with the CSBG Act and the state accountability measures. Here, the state will provide information about their mission and responsibilities, their CSBG-specific goals for the period covered by the plan, and the resources used to inform the development of the state plan, including tools or materials with data about the communities served, consultations with other agencies, and feedback from the eligible entities. Okay, for practice, please take a moment and enter in the chat one CSBG goal specific to your state. I'll take a look in the chat and see if folks are able to share any goals that they have for their CSBG program. So someone put in support the development of a robust data culture, increase quality and quantity of training and technical assistance, increase partnerships and linkages at the state level. These are all good goals. Enforce economic security through workforce development. Expand existing training and support programs for agency support staff, working with the state association, expanding training and support programs. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, these are all great examples of some goals for the CSBG state plan. For Section 3, OCS requests that states provide clear and robust goals in their plan. These goals should be advancing the mission and vision of CSBG and should be specific, measurable, and reflecting the current needs of the eligible entities. Section 3 also requests that the state list the resources used to inform the development of the state plan, including tools or materials with data about the communities served, consultations with other agencies, and feedback from the eligible entities. Consider how the state's goal can include strengthening the capacity of its eligible entities, ensuring accountability, and fostering partnerships that result in the reduction of the state's poverty rate. As a reminder, CSBG's broad goals are to eliminate the causes and conditions of poverty, empower low-income individuals and families to achieve self-sufficiency, and revitalize low-income communities. Your goals should impact these areas. OCS encourages elevated learning and improvement and tries to amplify innovative efforts of our grant recipients. This includes analyzing state and local tools and goals to identify areas for improvement and bringing the stakeholder input to the decision-making table. The ultimate purpose of this process is to ensure that the plan will best serve the communities across the state. While the state plan requires a public hearing and opportunities for comment, strong plans often reflect engagement that happens much earlier in the process. Early input helps ensure that statewide goals reflect the realities of service delivery and the needs identified at the local level. States may want to consider how eligible entities are engaged before the draft plan is developed, not just after it is written. For example, states might gather input during network meetings, strategic planning sessions, or through surveys to identify emerging needs and priorities. Engaging eligible entities early can strengthen alignment between statewide goals and local implementation. State associations and regional performance and innovation consortia, or RPICs, can also be valuable partners in the planning process. These partners often have insight into network-wide trends, training needs, and operational challenges. Inviting their feedback during plan development can help ensure that statewide goals are both strategic and achievable. The CSBG annual report is a particularly useful source of information. States may consider reviewing outcomes data and service delivery trends when developing statewide goals. This helps ensure that goals are informed by actual performance and community needs. States may also want to consider broader economic and community trends that could affect households with low income years from now. For example, workforce shortages, housing affordability, or regional economic shifts may influence the types of goals that states prioritize in their plans. Overall, Section 3 is meant to encourage states to align the mission and goals of CSBG to the overall mission of the state, to include voices of participants, to examine and update local level tools, such as the Community Needs Assessment, to better understand and address community needs, and to ensure engagement in continuous learning and process improvements based on feedback mechanisms, such as performance management data and the American Customer Satisfaction Index, or ACSI, survey. CSBG Information Memorandum 150, Use of the ACSI to Improve Network Effectiveness, provides guidance to states to help set realistic, reasonable, and attainable goals for eligible entity overall satisfaction, and to help encourage continued collaboration through feedback. The purpose of Section 4 is to verify that the state meets requirements for the public notice, the public hearing, and the legislative hearing for CSBG state plans as required in Section 676 of the CSBG Act. To complete Section 4, grant recipients should include information on the process for granting public access to the CSBG state plan and completion of public hearing, which occurs every time the state submits a plan, and the legislative hearings, which occur at least every 3 years, as well as combined hearings, which is one joint public and legislative hearing as applicable. While a combined hearing is an option, we ask that you strategically consider whether conducting a joint hearing maximizes input and furthers maximum feasible participation. Think about whether those who are being served will be inclined to or able to attend a legislative hearing. Ultimately, public input is important for ensuring CSBG is accurately reflecting locally driven solutions for locally identified needs. As such, the grant recipient should detail how they provided the public with sufficient time to provide feedback on the CSBG state plan. Distribution to the public should include distribution directly to the eligible entities, for example, via email or publication on a public website with a specific notification to the eligible entities or through meetings, as well as any other interested parties. In our previous webinar, a state shared that their eligible entities place a copy of the state plan on their websites, which may also be a way to encourage attendance at the hearing. Grant recipients need to provide documentation, including, but not limited to, agendas, sign-in sheets, transcripts, and notices or advertisements of the hearings. To re-emphasize, making sure the public receives notice for review of the CSBG state plan and hearings is crucial, as public input is important to ensuring CSBG is accurately reflecting the needs of the community. To encourage participation, some considerations include the following. Consider the purpose of the hearings. Maximum feasible participation is a key tenet of community action and CSBG. Ask yourselves, how can we reach more people and communities served and ensure that their recommendations are reflected in the CSBG state plan? Utilize all resources available to reach people and communities where they are, such as through the state association or the eligible entities themselves or partner organizations. Do you have the option of reaching people at statewide events, such as festivals or celebrations? Can the plan be made available through the use of QR codes, which can be scanned at various locations? Such engagement with your state planning process will only strengthen the plan itself and strengthen your approach to administering the grant. With that in mind, consider providing no fewer than 30 days for the public to provide feedback. This extended period provides adequate time for notifications to reach communities and for communities to find time to review and provide input. Grant recipients should consider providing a draft of the state plan to the eligible entities early in the process and for an adequate amount of time to receive input while the plan is still being developed. We have seen states who hold virtual gatherings, in-person meetings, or provide an email with the draft plan and encouragement to provide feedback from eligible entities prior to sharing for public viewing. As to engagement with the hearings, OCS encourages states to think creatively and to explore new ways to increase participation of stakeholders in the hearings. Finally, states should note any changes made to the state plan as a result of information received during the hearing process. This helps demonstrate that public input was not only collected, but also considered and incorporated where appropriate. Now it's time for an activity. Please share in the chat any ways you would strengthen this response for item 4.1 and why. I'll give everyone a few moments to consider how they would improve the short paragraph on the screen. And I'll read it out loud. So in what way would you make this response stronger? The state made the CSBG state plan available to the public for review prior to the public hearing. The plan was shared with eligible entities and posted on the agency's website for public access. Stakeholders and members of the public were invited to submit comments. A public hearing was held to allow individuals to provide input on the plan. After the hearing, the state finalized and submitted the state plan. So now I'll give folks a moment to just provide some suggestions for how you might make this a stronger response. Some folks are saying specifics on dates, timing, participants, how it was made available, for how long the plan was made available to the public. I think those are good suggestions, and I think those are strong suggestions for providing a little more substance in the response. And if we go to the next slide, here is an example of how you might improve upon the paragraph from the previous slide. You might note that the bold sections were added to provide more substantive information from the state. Please refer to these slides for reference once they are published and sent out online. And here you'll see, like people suggested, it talks about input being integrated into the final plan, how it was made available and for how long, with the number of comments received, etc. All right, my colleague Renee Brooks will now take over for section 5.
Thank you, Mitch. So section 5 covers CSBG eligible entities. The purpose of this section is to collect entity level data on CSBG eligible entities that include the name of the entity, the type of entity, the service area, and any changes to the eligible entity list. A requirement of CSBG is to ensure that we are getting 90% of the funding to communities we serve, and that is done through our eligible entities, making this section very important. This section is the official list of all CSBG eligible entities that receive the not less than 90% of funds passed through by the state. As a reminder, states and territories are the CSBG grant recipients. Eligible entities are the sub-grant recipients and are organizations designated by the state or territory to carry out the purposes of the CSBG Act. The 90% requirement comes from the CSBG Act, which requires states to pass through no less than 90% of their CSBG funds to eligible entities. There is also an important connection to keep in mind. The list of eligible entities in item 5.1 is pre-populated from the CSBG eligible entity master list. This means that if an entity is not on the master list, it will not appear in your state plan. If you see an entity listed that should not be there, it means that it is still included on your master list. You cannot add or remove entities directly in this section. Once you initialize your state plan, the list will be reflective of what is in the master list. For that reason, it is important to review and confirm that your eligible entity master list is accurate before you initialize your state plan. If you need assistance or if your entities are not pre-populating correctly, please reach out to your program specialist. So OCS has seen an increase in requests for technical assistance related to item 5.3, changes to the eligible entities. These changes generally fall into three categories: adding entities, removing entities, and merging entities. Items 5.3A, 5.3B, and 5.3C are used to report any updates to your eligible entity list. Completing this section accurately helps identify where technical assistance may be needed and ensures that service areas continue to be covered. Now, starting with 5.3A, this includes newly designated or redesignated eligible entities. A newly designated entity has completed the full designation process and will begin receiving CSBG funds during the state plan period. A redesignation happens when an existing eligible entity takes on a new service area that was previously served by another entity. This can be temporary or permanent. Now moving to 5.3B. This includes entities that have been de-designated or have voluntarily relinquished funding since the last state plan. These entities will no longer receive CSBG funds and should be removed from the eligible entity list. As a result, they should no longer appear in item 5.1. For 5.3C, this covers mergers. A merger occurs when two or more eligible entities combine to provide services. This may result in either creating a new entity or one entity absorbing another. If a new entity is created, the previous entities are removed and a new one is added. If one entity absorbs another, the absorbed entity is removed and the remaining entity service area is updated. It is important to note that changes to the entity status are not tracked within the eligible entity master list. The state plan is a primary place where these changes are formally documented. For all types of changes, states should have clear policies and procedures in place to ensure that communities do not go without services. We also encourage states to notify the federal office as soon as possible when changes are expected. OCS is available to provide support throughout these processes, including de-designations, mergers, and voluntary relinquishments. Finally, if your state has experienced a merger within the past 2 years, please reach out to your program specialist to share more information. This is an emerging area, and we want to stay connected and provide support where needed. Now, it's time for a quiz. True or false? States must use the Center of Excellence organizational standards for eligible entities. And I'll give everyone a moment to consider their response. I see a majority of y'all are getting the answer correct. And I see answers are still coming in, so we'll keep the poll on for one more minute. All right, we can go ahead and close the poll. And the correct answer is false. The CSBG COE organizational standards were developed through an OCS-funded working group and with input from stakeholders across the network and are strongly encouraged. However, while they represent a comprehensive framework aligned with the CSBG Act, OCS recognizes that every state and their entities are unique. Some states have already opted to utilize alternative sets of standards that work best for their network. Regardless, the state has discretion in choosing their organizational standards framework. And thank you all for participating. Now, in section 6, states will describe their procedures related to organizational standards for eligible entities. This includes the choice of standards you will be implementing, such as those developed by the OCS-funded Organizational Standards Center of Excellence, or COE, the COE version with modifications, or an alternative standard. As mentioned previously, states have discretion on the set of standards they may use. However, OCS recommends states use the organizational standards developed by the COE because they lay a foundation for meeting the requirements of the CSBG Act, good management practices, and the values of community action. In this section, the state will also provide information on the state-level implementation process, the assessment procedures, including corrective action procedures and special circumstances or exceptions to that process. The information that states provide in this section allows OCS to assess if the state's policies and procedures meet the requirements under the CSBG Act and identify any necessary training and technical assistance. The state should review IM 138 to better understand the state's roles and responsibilities for the establishment of organizational standards for eligible entities. IM 138 serves as a guidance tool for states and eligible entities to better understand what the organizational standards are, to establish robust assessment processes, and to identify promising practices and other tools. The purpose of the organizational standards is to ensure that eligible entities have the organizational capacity necessary to administer CSBG. Implemented in fiscal year 16, the organization standards are composed of 3 thematic groups with 9 categories and a total of 58 standards for private, nonprofit entities and 50 standards for public entities. The 3 themes are maximum feasible participation, vision and direction, and operations and accountability. The COE developed organizational standards work together to characterize an effective and healthy organization. States must provide consistent and high-quality oversight and technical assistance related to organizational standards. Again, the state should review IM 138 to better understand the state's roles and responsibilities for the establishment of organizational standards for eligible entities. As I have mentioned, states have the discretion to establish organizational standards other than the COE developed set. While a state has the ability to choose which standards they use, they still have to demonstrate that their chosen standards are at least as rigorous and comprehensive as the standards developed by the COE. If a state chooses alternative standards, OCS will review their responses in Section 6 closely to ensure they are implemented adequately. OCS recommends that the state establish a comprehensive assessment process that includes clear communication to eligible entities, an annual assessment on the status of standards among all the eligible entities for reporting to OCS and the CSBG annual report. and an assurance that the assessment of standards is independently verified by the state or a third party. Also essential is a well-informed process, and therefore, the state is strongly encouraged to collaborate with the eligible entities and their corresponding state association to set appropriate targets to meet the state's goals. Stakeholders in the local CSBG network can provide valuable insight into the organizational capacity of eligible entities, the realistic achievement of performance targets, and areas for training and technical assistance that will be needed to achieve the new target. We also want to emphasize that organizational standards should supplement your state's monitoring process. However, they should not be the only component when conducting your state's monitoring on the eligible entities. For example, Standard 5.2 says the organization's governing board has written procedures that document a democratic selection process for low-income board members adequate to assure that they are representative of the low-income community. However, having written procedures and following them are two different things. So let's take a moment to closely consider item 6.3a. This narrative response item asks the state for information on how they assess eligible entities regarding their organizational standard progress. I'll give folks some time to write down how your state reviews eligible entities and works with them to resolve unmet standards. If you are comfortable, please share in the chat with a sentence or two responding to this question. I'll give y'all some time to think. All right. With the interest of time, we will go ahead and move forward, but please, if you do feel comfortable, feel free to share in the chat for peer-to-peer learning. Section 7, state use of funds, is a critical segment of the state plan, as it outlines how funds will be allocated, distributed, and managed among the eligible entities, and the use of any remaining funds for administrative expenses and discretionary spending. Section 7 allows OCS to see a comprehensive picture of how funding is planned for use, along with the financial management and accountability principles the states are implementing. Under the CSBG Act, Section 675C, states are required to demonstrate a planned allocation of no less than 90% of the funds to eligible entities. This supports the block grant structure and CSBG's focus on local service delivery to address locally identified needs. It ensures resources are used among those who need them most. To help visualize this distribution, the state plan provides a table that outlines the percentage of allocated funds for each eligible entity receiving funds during the fiscal year or years addressed by the plan. By doing so, recipients promote transparency and facilitate better understanding of how these funds are utilized. It's important to note that this data will directly impact the state's annual report, specifically in Module 1, Table E2. The distribution timeframe referenced in item 7.4 ensures that allocated funds reach eligible entities within 30 calendar days following the federal award by OCS. The prompt distribution of these funds is crucial in ensuring aid reaches those in need. Item 7.4a requires states who fail to meet this 30-day deadline have proper procedures in place to ensure funds remain available to eligible entities consistently and without interruption. Item 7.4a directly connects to State Accountability Measure 2SA and may affect your state's annual report form. Overall, efficiency and transparency in procedures creates better performance and evaluation systems and fosters a sense of accountability among all involved. And under the CSBG Act, Section 675C, grant recipients can use up to 5% or $55,000 of their CSBG funds toward administrative activities. Item 7.6 plays a vital role in determining the percentage of the planned allocation dedicated to these activities for the fiscal years covered by the state plan. To complete this section effectively, consider the following activities. Review your organization's budget and historical allocation percentages for administrative activities. Analyze any trends or changes in these allocations and determine if adjustments are needed for the upcoming fiscal years. Consider the impact of any new programs or initiatives in your community that may require additional administrative support. Ensure that the specified percentage is aligned with your overall strategic plan and goals for community development. Keep documentation supporting your allocation decisions readily available for reference during potential audits or reviews. Please keep in mind that this information pre-populates the state's annual report, specifically Module 1 in Table E4. Lastly, according to CSBG Act Section 675C, after distributing at least 90% of CSBG funds to eligible entities and up to an optional 5% or for administrative purposes, the grant recipient may use the remainder of their appropriation for discretionary purposes. This may be up to 10% if funds were not used for administrative purposes. The Act details several approved activities for which discretionary funds can be used. The table, consisting of items 7.9A through 7.9H, allows for the grant recipient to identify how much of the remainder funds are being utilized across authorized uses, such as competitive funding opportunities for local eligible entities, training and technical assistance activities, and supporting innovative programs and activities, and to provide a brief description of the services and activities. OCS requests this information to understand in what ways discretionary funds are being used. Please keep in mind that this information pre-populates the state's annual report, specifically Module 1, Table E7, and is associated with State Accountability Measure 3SA. Ensuring accuracy across Section 7 will not only streamline your reporting process, but also reflect your commitment to transparency and responsible management of CSBG funds. By being proactive and diligent about completing all of the Section 7, you will contribute to a properly managed CSBG program that fosters growth and development within your communities. Now, before we wrap up, I want to make a few notes about the Online Data Collection System, or OLDC, which is where you will complete and submit your CSBG state plan. At least 2 people from your office will likely need OLDC access if they do not have it already. The person who will complete the state plan and the authorized official who will certify and submit it. If you need help troubleshooting with OLDC, please reach out to your Policy Data and Evaluation branch using the contact information in the chat. You will want to copy your assigned program specialist and your data and evaluation specialist to ensure a timely response. Each region is assigned a program specialist and a policy data and evaluation specialist. For targeted and general technical assistance, please reach out to your assigned program specialist and copy the policy data and evaluation specialist. We work closely as a team and request that you include both contacts in any outreach. You can find your regional contacts on the page shared in the chat. For fiscal and OCS monitoring questions, please reach out to the Fiscal Accountability and Operations Unit at ocsfoau@acf.hhs.gov and CC your program specialist. If you are having issues with your OLDC account, please contact the Grant Solutions Help Desk and copy both your program specialist and PDE specialist.